The way we think about getting more accurate is creating capacity for our internal team. And the way we create capacity for our internal team is look at the things that they are doing that humans shouldn't be doing. Like what
Yeah,
highly administrative rote tasks that they're doing out of necessity and it's just bogging them down. Those,
yeah,
in our opinion, are perfect for automation. And so these
yeah,
are the things that we're seeking to do to create more capacity for our team so they can focus on more complex claims issues, becoming
yeah.
more accurate, and providing a higher degree of customer care.
Hi, everyone. Thanks again for listening. Today, I'm speaking with Charlie Wendland. Charlie is the head of claims at Branch Insurance, one of the most innovative insurtechs out in the US. Charlie, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited about this conversation.
So I'm going to dig right in. My perspective about doing this is understanding the stories behind insurance, not just talking about combined ratios and loss adjustment expenses. So the thing that I always ask people is, if you were to explain to your family, to your children, if you have kids, to your partner, to your parents, what you do, how do you explain what you do?
I try not to just because I don't want to bore anybody. But the way I would explain it is we're in the business of helping people and protecting them, right? Especially with what we do in claims. The way we talk about it internally in Branch is that we want to be our members' best friend on their worst day. I mean, this is the way that I would explain it to my children as well as my wife, so long as I can keep them awake during.
That totally makes sense. And I think, insurance is one of those things where nobody gets it until they have to deal with it. But when they deal with it, they're like, oh, thank God I had insurance, and they're able to get help.
Yeah, I had no great understanding prior to, over 20 years ago when I started in insurance. I knew you had to have it legally to drive, but I didn't fully understand all the reasons and what it is in terms of like a financial protection instrument. Obviously developed that appreciation through the course of my career.
Initially, what got you into insurance?
Yeah, I live in Cleveland, Ohio. And Progressive is in Cleveland, Ohio. And when I graduated college, there was a career fair and they were there. And I submitted an application, just as you tend to do at career fairs with a lot of different local employers. And they didn't call me. It took about 8 months after I submitted that application for them to call me. And I was doing something else at the time, but very happy they did. And I applied for the claims position because they had some really interesting marketing about it, how they're helping people responding to accidents and helping people get back on their feet. And that really appealed to me. So was delighted that they finally called me
Oh,
and accepted me to join.
you had an interesting career arc, right? Like you worked at what I call some of the gold standard insurance companies where the processes are perfect. They've been refined over years and years. And then you went and you were at Branch from almost the start in terms of setting the company up and building out the claims function. As you think through some of the differences between doing claims or building out an insurance claims function from the grounds up at Branch versus what you saw at Progressive and Travelers, what are some of the big differences?
It's interesting. Well, there's certainly differences, but if it were not for the knowledge I gained at the places that I worked prior to Branch, I would have no idea of what I'm doing here and how to build this thing. And even then, it was very difficult. I think what I gained in my experience prior to coming to Branch was a really solid foundational knowledge of how claims should operate. Throughout the course of my career, anyway, I would be in a role and I'd say, this thing that I do is really inefficient and it's bogging me down. And I know how I can fix it. But I know in order to get it fixed, I have to go through like 7 layers of management. And then even then, that person's probably not going to want to talk to me. And so I just kind of suffer with it and
Yeah,
try to work around it. We didn't have that burden at Branch because we had a blank slate. So we could
yeah.
really create it how we wanted to create it in the most efficient way that we thought possible. And that's exactly what we did. But we wouldn't have been able to do that had it not been for that experience gained at those other companies.
Do you think that the bigger companies can learn from insurtechs? Like, are there things they can learn, or are they really mature? What's the reverse learning that's possible?
I think that there is some good things that can be taken from insurtech companies that can be applied to legacy carriers. It's a lot harder to institute because you have
Yeah.
this giant ship that you're trying to turn. Whereas insurtechs, we can be quite nimble because we're so young and we can make changes very quickly because we don't have this long legacy that we need to consider, or these very rigid systems that are very siloed. We don't have any of that here. So yes, there are lessons that can be learned there. It's very hard. Where do you start? And also thinking about the other parts of your business that are impacted by the decisions you're making to become efficient in this one area. How does it impact the rest of the organization, and how long will it take, and what resources will be required to make that change? And is that change going to be worth the effort that you put into it to begin with?
So you touched on a really important point, right? Like one of the challenges almost everybody faces, especially with just the sheer amount of new technologies that are emerging all the time, is prioritization, right? Where do I go? What do I pick? How do I address that particular thing? What value will it create for the company? So looking inwards, right? Looking at Branch, you have decision-making authority. You have the ability to decide where you folks focus on. How do you do it? What's the framework or the rubric that you apply to figure out where to prioritize?
It's a pretty simple way of looking at things. First of all, customer experience is number one. And that goes for not only our external customers, our members, but also our internal customers. So for us, it's our claims team. How is this going to change their working day? And will it be for the better? And what efficiencies do we gain? And I'm sure we'll talk more about that. So that's the first one. The second one is, when we implement whatever process we're putting in, are we solving a problem? I found that there's a tendency to get this bright new shiny thing because it's the bright new shiny thing, without any idea of what problem are we really solving here? And so we have to be able to have a really solid problem statement, and that problem statement needs to have a very tangible impact on the business, one that you can often quantify. But then above all that is, what are the resources needed? And this goes back to is the juice worth the squeeze? But yeah, we start with customer experience, move on to the problem statement, and that usually takes us to the place that we ultimately want to go and helps guide our decision making.
So in that, in the framework that you have today, in the list that you have today, what would be the top 3 things that really is top of mind for you, that you believe if you achieve is going to create massive impact for your business?
This is a great question. I mean, it's almost like an innumerable list. But what I think about a lot I think what we have built here at Branch is working really, really well, surprisingly well, right? Because we built it from nothing, and we had a very deliberately methodical internalization of our claims processes, because in the first part of Branch, we were using a TPA exclusively. But when we built all this, we slowly internalized, as I said, some of those claims to test what we've built to make sure that it worked. And again, somewhat surprisingly, it worked. And so our team works really hard, and they're really good at, we throw a lot at them, tons of changes. And so what I found is we are getting industry-like or better outcomes in almost every measurable category. It's the margins now that I'm concerned about. And when I think about margins, I think about indemnity outcomes on claims. Are we being accurate in our payments? The way we think about getting more accurate is creating capacity for our internal team. And the way we create capacity for our internal team is look at the things that they are doing that humans shouldn't be doing. What highly administrative rote tasks that they're doing out of necessity, and it's just bogging them down. Those, in our opinion, are perfect for automation. And so these are the things that we're seeking to do to create more capacity for our team so they can focus on more complex claims issues, becoming more accurate, and providing a higher degree of customer care.
It's so fascinating. I started in insurance a long time back, and I remember a time when you would go to the claims department and everybody would have a binder, and every binder would be one claim, right? And so the idea would be that binder would need to just keep getting filled with more and more stuff. And at that point in time, the biggest pain point I remember was oh, we have to keep sending faxes for everything. There's no emails, right? So we have to, and especially because, I mean, I'm not aging myself here. Even when I started, there was email, but with claims, so much of the communication had to be official, right? So must go out via a fax between the agent and the claims department. And so as that happened, the binder just kept getting full and full and full. And so the initial idea for automation, even like 20 years back, was, oh, we got to find a way to like get these faxes sent out automatically, or we'll get a department. That department will only do faxes, and so the adjuster does not have to do the faxes anymore. Somebody else will. And it's fascinating how that just, I mean, the technologies change, the ideas change, the impact dramatically changes, and it's a thing that just always has opportunities for improvement.
Yeah, I totally agree. And what's really funny, and the reason why I was kind of laughing is when I was waiting for Progressive to call, I was selling fax machines. But and so, that's kind of how old I am. But yeah, in addition to that, yeah, the we've always done it this way kind of a thing.
Yeah.
When I
Yeah.
was working in a claims department, and we not only had to keep those accordion folders of the hard file, but everything that we sent electronically, because we were doing a lot of electronic stuff at that time. So emails, even after the email was sent, and we had record of that digitally, we would
Yeah.
have to print out the email, put it
Yes.
into the hard copy file. Never made any sense. But if you asked anyone, well, this is how we do things.
Correct.
So that was, again, this is not something that we instituted at Branch. We're not faxing.
So let's talk about this is how we do things. Change is always weird and complex and clunky, I would say, right? So let's assume, you've got ideas of driving improvements, you adopt a new technology. How hard is the change piece in just getting it instituted? And then I guess the word enforcing is wrong because you're trying to do it as a benefit, but like getting it adopted, I guess, would be a better word.
Yeah, we've approached this a couple ways. The first one is we really lean into transparency, explaining what we're doing and the why. And so, I'll tie that into the core values of our company, from Branch. We refer to them as roots. One of them is ask why, right? Like, you should be very curious about the things that we're doing and have a great understanding of that. And then through asking why, you're able to, another one of our roots is call the play, right? Like, don't just sit here and wait for something to be done. Take action and call that play. And then the third root, we have several roots, but the third one that I'm using in this example is this is V1. So this is the first version. And so leaning into that transparency to say, here's the thing that we're doing, here's why we're doing it. And oh, by the way, this is the first version of this, which means it's going to be a little clunky. But I want your feedback to tell me what's clunky so we can get it to the place where we ultimately want it to be. And so what we have found is, and we're not perfect at this, right? Like, change management is incredibly difficult, even working at a startup where things are changing all the time. Lean into the transparency and into our own roots, and people are more apt to embrace that change. The other thing that we did is we looked for that low-hanging fruit from the beginning. Like, what are the things that are just like perfect for automation right now, the quick wins that we can then build trust with the team that, we know what we're doing. We have your best interests at heart here, trying to make your job easier. And so trust us for all these other things that we want to do because they're plentiful and the change is never ending.
Is there anything there that's surprised you, like as you've adopted these technologies? And I'm aware a little bit about just the sheer amount of innovation that's happened at Branch. But from your perspective, and for those that are listening, like, what's been like a surprise? Like, you thought this would be a slam dunk. We'll do it. It'll get deployed. It'll be amazing. Did something come out that was just like, oh wait, it was interesting, surprising.
I'll tell you, and I'm not just saying this. Like, we haven't had one of those yet. We've had, I would say, more process-oriented stuff that hadn't worked the way that we wanted it to. There's one that we just built ourselves, which was around bulk billing. We work with a lot of vendors as a startup because we don't have the resources to internalize every part of the claim. We have all these different vendors that send us invoices. And so rather than paying each one of those invoices individually, we pay them in bulk and then allocate them to the claim.
Got it.
The problem that we encountered there is we didn't anticipate how much bad data we would be getting in those invoices, and then had to manually allocate those because the automation we built couldn't find them because the data inputs were all bad.
Yeah.
It's one that I didn't fully anticipate, and we're working to improve. But other than that, the team has been very receptive to what we've thrown at them, and we've thrown at them a lot. I mean, they're a resilient bunch, and it's so that makes it a lot of fun to come up with new creative things.
Let's talk about AI. We can't have an insurance experience podcast and not talk about AI, as much as we can avoid it. What's your perspective? Like, where does it go? What's the use? What's not useful? Where's the hype? Where's the reality?
It's funny. I was at a conference earlier this week, and I would ask people like, "Hey, what are you talking about, or what did this person talk about?" And everyone, it became a joke. Well, AI. I think about AI is currently, I think it has a ton of potential, and we're using it in certain instances. We are very careful about anything that is externally customer facing. We have to be really confident that it's going to do what we want it to do. We are not having it make judgment calls about claims outcomes. We're not going to replace humans there. I don't know that we ever will. However, for things that should be automated and not done by humans, as I mentioned before, highly administrative, rote tasks, it's perfect use for AI. We're using AI a ton in the back office right now. We'll be launching soon with a external customer facing AI solution. And that is one that is purely data collection around first notice of loss. That's a perfect use case. I think it has a lot of potential. I love the things that we're using it for right now. It's created a ton of capacity for our team and efficiencies for branch. We'll continue to look for those opportunities. The way I see it evolving, I see more of what I had just described. I think our industry will eventually move more from claims investigation to claims confirmation. And what I mean by that is we use telematics a lot right now to understand, what happened in an accident, right? Like you get it off the phone, or you can get it, from OEM, from the vehicle, depending on the type of vehicle it is. When you have that, and then you have like IoT devices, and you have video in the cars right now, and some of them are recording. What will be really interesting in probably like 10 years, once we have all of that information available, all that data available, who owns it, right? But how can we operationalize it in the claims process to where the claims process, that first call, instead of saying, "Hey, Mr. Insured, sorry you were in an accident, please tell me what happened," instead that turns into, "Hey, Mr. Insured, sorry you were in an accident. It looks like you were heading north on Broadway at 35 miles an hour, and at this intersection, and that's so once you have that, you move from claims confirmation. That dramatically changes your claims operation. Your cycle times get reduced. You're no longer, who knows, maybe we're not even ordering police reports, right? Because you have video, you have all that other data. That dynamically changes anything. And so when you have an AI overlay to all of that, that's able to ingest all of that data, structured or unstructured, to assist the humans in making those decisions, I think that's going to be a game changer. And that's when we've been talking about touchless claims and straight through processing for years. I've yet to see an application that lives into that. I think it becomes more of a realization when we get to, that area I just described.
So this is fascinating. I had a car once that had, one of those like OnStar things where you could press the button and it would call you. And I was in a situation where I needed to use it. And I think one of the best things was the ability to call something like that when you're in the car and get access, right? Similarly, one of the biggest pieces of appreciation I developed when developing software for claims, when filing my own claims, is that it's one of the most vulnerable points in time, right, of somebody's life when they're going through this experience. And so interestingly, they're also most amenable to finding opportunities to help them in the act of, getting the claim resolved. And so I'm very bullish on the idea that these pieces of information, when stitched together, would have massive value.
Massive value. And, proactive first notice of loss is available now, right? Like, so when your phone detects that you've perhaps been in a collision, you could send a push notification. That feels really good. When you think of families, I have 2 drivers in the house, getting notifications that one of them may have been in an accident before they call me. That makes me feel very secure. But I agree with you. I mean, you talk about streamlining the process. And when you do that, the customer experience is so much better. You're just getting
Yeah.
our customers back to where they need to be much more quickly through the use of all of this data. And again, if you can have an AI on top of that to assist that human, it just makes it all the better.
It's important also that the idea of assisting the human, right? Like, because I think there's two sort of schools of thought in AI, right? Like, one is like, people ask, when will I get the first AI, the AI adjuster, right? Like, there's like, this like weird vision of like some bionic human who's going to do all adjusting. And then the other school of thought is, I think the human element is never going to go away, right? I think the ability for humans to make judgments, the ability for humans to react real time, and just the sheer signals that we can process compared to developing all of that in AI. And it seems, I think you're saying, and which is also where my thinking is the value here is in speeding up, in providing more context, but ultimately it's humans making decisions on behalf of other humans, not AI just automatically deciding things.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I don't think AI will replace humans for adjusting claims. I think AI will make humans much better at adjusting claims and will make the customer experience that much better. For, again, as I said before, external and internal. It's going to make adjusters' lives so much easier because they won't be saddled with all of this historically administrative stuff. And now they're spending time on customer care, like white glove service, and really focusing on complex issues that normally they don't have time for because they're saddled with all this other stuff they ought not be doing.
Switching sort of like topics, if you were to look at the world you see today, right? Like the world at branch, the world in insurance in general, innovations that are happening across the, technology in general, or just in our world. And you had a magic wand to say, oh, I wish this thing existed, and it just doesn't exist right now. And it can be as big or as specific, doesn't have to be anything grandiose. What is that one thing that you're just not seeing where you just wish somebody figured it out?
The one thing that I talk about a lot is I would love an assistant for our team that would be able to review a claim file and all the documents associated with that and provide summaries and allow some interrogation, rather than, and I'm talking about like the policy as well. And also like flag issues for adjusters. Like, hey, this claim just came in. You need to review this part of the policy. And here's some other things that you should, pay attention to as well. And then ask questions like, well, why should I review this? Or, adjusters will, especially new adjusters, will have a lot of questions about policy interpretation and things like that. To be able to interrogate a policy and ask questions about, is this thing covered, or how should I think about that, or this instance, and to get some really like meaningful answers, not to direct the adjuster and say like, this is what you must follow, but to get them on the right path, I think is really, really interesting and can be useful. Allow for more self-service, I guess is what I'm saying. And I mentioned the other thing about like the overlaying of like an entire claim file. Reassignment of claim files in a claims organization is frequent. And often the worst part of an adjuster's job is getting a reassigned file, especially one that has accordion folders, that goes back years and years and years. And so to be able to like quickly understand what's happening in that claim and get up to speed, I think would be really useful. I know of some companies that have either built this or developing this, but it's not yet to the point, at least in my opinion, of where I would ultimately like to see it, become. But that's the one thing that I think about a lot in terms of, all the other things that we would love to have. I think that's the most useful.
That's fascinating. I kind of like, in layman's terms, I liken it to you going to get an X-ray. And once the X-ray comes out, the AI will like circle all the scary areas and then ask the radiologist, listen, this is what I think may be scary, but you decide, right? And it's exactly that, right? Like, it's not saying like, oh, you've got something wrong, but it does at least a good job of applying one pass at things.
You're mitigating human error. I mean, this is what we're talking about.
Exactly.
And so this is something I'm very keen on.
That's exciting. All right. So the last question I have for you is, if people want to find you, follow you, hear your thoughts, is there somewhere out there in the internet where they can follow you?
I don't have a strong internet presence. I'm on LinkedIn. And so if people would like to connect with me, happy to. It's just Charlie Wendland. I don't know what the URL is.
Got it. Awesome. Charlie, this has been an awesome convo. I've learned so much. Thank you for joining.
Thank you, Amrish. This was great.